Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I am here with a Slimline card using 6x6 pattern paper, and it's a sketch template so that you can recreate it and you can use the 6x6 pattern paper with no scraps by using the template. For the definition for today's video is going to be a Slimline card as 8.5 by 3.5. There are some other sizes that are out there, but this seems to be the most popular one, and it does work well for using with 6x6 paper. So when I talk about Slimline cards, that's just going to be the size that I prefer. I am going to use some Sunny Studio gingham paper here. And the Sunny Studio packs are really great for all of my one sheet wonders and slimlines because they are double-sided, but the patterns are really simple. And so it makes it easy to kind of flip it over and mix the patterns when I want to. And it means that it will go with a wide variety of stamps and other things like that. So I really recommend theirs if you're in the market for some simple but really useful pattern paper. Okay, so I cut the 6x6 piece to 3x6 and then took one of the 3x6s and cut it to 3x2 and 3x4. The 3x4 is going to be the focal point of the card, and then the 3x2 and 3x6 are going to be combined to make a 3x8 that will be the background panel. When you make the 3x8, I like to put all of my layers on mats most of the time, usually in these template videos in particular, but sometimes in my 6x6 tutorials, you'll see some sketches that don't use mats. But in this case, the mat helps me to get to that 3.5 by 8.5 size because I can put a 1/4 inch mat around it, and then there'll be a 1/4 inch to the edge of the card there at the 3.5 by 8.5 size. Today I'm going to be using this new stamp set from Avery Elle. It's called Sending Hugs, and I actually purchased the dies to go with it, which is not something that I would ordinarily do, but there were a couple of unique things about this stamp set that made me think a die would be easier than using my ScanNCut. In particular, it creates the envelope, and it has a die that cuts just the front flaps of the envelope so that you can layer them on top of each other and start tucking things into the envelope. The other reason that I picked up the dies, and I did mention this when I shared it in a haul, but I just want to talk about it here briefly as well, is that the bellies of the characters are open. And so if I wanted to cut those with my ScanNCut, I would have to take a pencil and draw in a little belly piece so that the ScanNCut could recognize, because the ScanNCut's going to look for black lines. And if it doesn't see a complete outline, it's going to start having much more difficulty cutting the image. So if you can complete the black outline yourself by either drawing it in with a black marker or temporarily drawing it in with a pencil and then erasing it, it will be able to handle it. But I just kind of wanted to explain why one might make the choice. And the other thing is this particular die set came with 3 die cut words that I thought I would use the hugs, and I'm going to use it today. So I felt like the die was worth it in this instance for those reasons. I am going to cut the hugs word out of craft cardstock 3 times. I did all of my mats in craft cardstock, and then I'm going to work with a white card base. I'm going to go over my Copic coloring. Sorry that some of the marker caps got out of the shot there, but I think I fixed it in all of them. I do try when coloring in my videos to use the same colors of Copics repeatedly. I have a lot of Copics and it can be fun to have lots of colors, but you can do a lot with only a few. So if you find a green blending family that you like, you're going to be able to color trees and leaves and all kinds of green things, green animals, frogs, whatever, with that color combination. You're not going to need a whole bunch. I personally prefer the YGs over the Gs. I particularly like this YG 171311 for a bright green look. And then for a darker but still very natural green look, I prefer some of the higher YGs, and I think I'll show them in this video as well. I'm going to keep the Copic coloring really simple as always, because particularly in the videos, sometimes I do more complicated Copic coloring and I tend to share those more on Instagram, but I want to show you just how approachable coloring can be. I only have experience with Copic markers, but a lot of these things will hold true for different alcohol markers. I kind of, in this instance, am just choosing some really really simple shadow areas, like where the leaves are showing the lines, or there's lines, artist drawn lines in the flower. That's where I am going to be adding my shadows, and along the base of objects. So like where this flower is meeting the petals at the bottom, that's where I'm going to add just a little bit of shadow, or where the petals are overlapping each other. In terms of pinks, the RVs are maybe sometimes more traditionally thought of as the pinks, but there's actually a really nice range in the Rs, the R8s, that I tend to prefer for pinks. They are just a little bit more natural looking to me. The RVs tend to get a little too bright, and so if I'm coloring something in nature like a flower, probably going to go with the R8 family. The E's are the hardest ones for me to say, like which ones I would, if I was only going to have a few, because there are so many browns in nature, and there are so many things that you can color brown. Brown is needed for skin tones. Brown is needed for many animals. Browns are needed for so many, like other things in nature, like, sticks and tree barks and et cetera, et cetera. So with that in mind, I find having more choices with my E's is actually better than having like a ton of greens or a ton of pinks per se. For the envelope, I do want to add just a little bit of color. I generally want it to look like it's white, but if I were to just leave it stark white, it would really stand out in, to me, a bad way compared to all the other detailed Copic coloring. The darker greens that I colored are the YG9 family, YG93, 95, and 97, and I did similar shading. I just wanted to add some variation. I thought this was a little bit brighter with just the YG1 family that I showed coloring with earlier, and I think the YG9s kind of toned it down. And so, yeah, I kind of mentioned that I had two sets of greens that I really liked. I'm taking the W because I want it to, in general, have a warm look, just because all the other colors that I chose were a little bit more on the warm side, and I had the craft background. So I thought that the W markers as a gray versus, like, say, the C markers just felt like they would go better with the tone of the card, because the W's have a little bit of a brown undertone, whereas the C markers are, they're called cool grays because they are a much cooler, more blue sort of undertone. I'm going to use some, well, it's not foam tape, because I actually am just going to use some pieces of scrap cardstock kind of layered up and glued together. And I am going to use that to pop up my envelope. For the Hugs word, I did cut it out 3 times, and I glued them all together with my Barely Art glue. I like the thick dimension of that. I think it makes, especially because these letters are so small, having more dimension to them adds a lot of interest, makes them more prominent. Because I picked the W's for my envelope, I'm going to use the W's to color in my character as well. I wasn't sure at first which of the different characters I would want to use. I kind of figured I was going to use the lamb or the elephant, and that's why I stamped those two, because they could be colored gray and they would not add a new color. There's a fox in the set, and if I pulled in the fox, I don't think the orange would have went very well with the pink, which is my background color, and it would have added a whole new color to the mix. Whereas I like to keep my color palette limited. I feel like that is one of the easiest ways for your card to look, I don't want to say professional, because I don't think that's what any of us are really going for per se, but just like more, it helps it look cohesive, well designed, because there's nothing clashing with each other. Like if you keep the color palette limited, then you're not, your eye is not distracted by some of the, like all the different choices or all the different things going on. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to be using my Barely Art glue to start attaching all of these little pieces. As I mentioned before, I do want my envelope to pop up so that I can tuck the lamb inside of the envelope. And so I'm taking some scrap cardstock from this project and I doubled it up, and then I'm cutting it apart and gluing it down. Here again with my glue. That little blue thing on my desk is my glue holder. I don't use it like 100% of the time. It's from Make It by Marco, but I do find it helpful when you're gluing down a bunch of things to have it sitting in that holder because it keeps the glue at the tip. If you're going really fast, it's not a big deal, but also keeping it, like storing it in the holder like that can be helpful because again, it just keeps the glue down at the bottom of the tip, but it's on a slight angle. So I find that preferable. There are also glue holders that hold them straight up and down. I don't like those as much just because I've experienced more issues with like, there's like a pin that holds the glue, and I have experienced more issues with that, like kind of clogging things up. So that's just so you know what that blue thing is. I'm not using it very much at the particular moment, but that is what that is. I'm going to be adding the sentiment right here onto the envelope. I also added the little speech bubble heart. In the end, I'm not sure that I like that as much as I thought I would. I kind of wish I had left that out, but I also glued my hugs word a little bit too far to the left, and to balance that out, I'm actually just going to go back and add a little flower from the stamp set that has the die. That's what that die sitting on my desk is, just to balance out the word because I don't want to try to pull it off and mess up anything. So if you ever have a little bit of an off balance sentiment or something, sometimes adding a little bit of extra, like a little embellishment, can help bring it back towards the center. So that's it for my card today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more crafting tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I will leave you links to the PDF template below so that you can download that and to some other videos for you to check out here. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.